So the Gaza genocide has offered people who have previously been Zionists an opportunity to sort of rebrand and clean up their image and act like they have always been pro-Palestine, just because they happen to be on the right side of this one event that what they did previously helped to cause, helped to enable. Because it's so easy to say, oh, it's wrong to massacre children as Israel is doing. Less easy to do was to previously be against everything that led to this happening. And one of those people, one of these liberal Zionists who is now basically experiencing a massive resurgence and a whitewashing of their previous image, thanks to the Gaza genocide, is Owen Jones. Owen Jones is a lifelong Zionist, very much so. Someone who has always supported the existence of Israel, who has always supported the two-state solution, who has always been far more concerned with the feelings of Zionist Jews than he ever has with the Palestinians who they massacre. Someone who has made a career of pretending to be pro-Palestine while consorting with the Israel lobby, while being against the most basic facets of the Palestinian solidarity movement like BDS, and while talking far more about the supposed left anti-Semitism problem and coddling the feelings of Zionist Jews who want to kill all Palestinians than he ever has been with the actual suffering that they cause to Palestinians. So here's an example from 2017 where Jones spoke at a Zionist lobby event, even after he was begged not to do so by dozens upon dozens, if not hundreds of people. And Jones then followed this up with a slew of articles where he defended his decision and took pride in it, like this one that you can see on the screen right now, where he outright says that he was very, very glad to have been on the opposite side of the people who were calling him out for speaking at a Zionist lobby event. In it, he makes very clear that he believes in a two-state solution where Israelis get a Jewish ethno-state on stolen Palestinian land, and says that he was standing in solidarity with genocidal Zionists because they feel increasingly alienated by the left. Oh, their poor genocidal feelings, right? And that is what Owen Jones was dedicated to all the way up until the Gaza genocide, proposing liberal Zionist solutions and using liberal Zionist talking points regarding Palestinians, and using that lip service as a cover for his main role, which was to police the speech of actual pro-Palestinian people and defend Zionist Jews, genocidal Zionist Jews, on the basis that their feelings were being hurt whenever they were being called out for being genocidal Zionists, basically either implying or directly accusing those who think that maybe we shouldn't cater to the feelings of genocidal people, of settler colonists, of ethno-nationalists. You know, maybe we don't actually want them on the left just because they're Jewish. Maybe they should be excluded from the left, just like we would of people with the same exact views of any other ethnicity, of being anti-Semitic. He has been this sort of liberal Zionist, anti-Palestinian smear agent for literally 10 years before the Gaza genocide, and only now is he starting to try to clean up his image and wipe this history away. We should not let him do it. So I actually DM'd Owen Jones before making this, and he insisted that he had actually always been for the one-state solution, not the two-state solution. And his evidence of this was a media appearance that he made in 2012, which he sent me a clip of, and I'll play that here.
The key point there... You heard what she said, which was that the number of people who've now settled in the West Bank make the two-state solution practically impossible.
There are two possible solutions. One is to have a federal solution where you have equal rights for both Arabs and Jews. That seems to many people obviously far-fetched, but they did say that about South Africa back in the day. Otherwise, you have to dismantle the settlements, enforce international law. But what has to happen, because the point is Britain supports, as other Western countries do, they've supported and armed Israel to the teeth. They're not acting as honest brokers. They have to use their pressure to force Israel to give in and give justice to the Palestinian people.
Owen, thank you. I'm going to take a couple more points from the audience, then we'll move on.
Now, you might have noticed something rather important there, which is that in that clip, he doesn't actually express his personal support for the one-state solution. He's just outlining that there is a one-state solution and a two-state solution. Some people support one of them, some people support the other. He doesn't proclaim his own opinion either way. So his characterization of that clip as evidence of him being a one-state supporter forever is just a lie, as when he did actually talk about his own opinion on this much later, for example, in this article from 2017, he advocated for a two-state solution. It is only with the Gaza genocide that Owen Jones has finally started admitting the obvious that the two-state solution is a bullshit red herring, but only after he spent a decade coddling the feelings of genocidal Zionists by pretending otherwise. In my little discussion with him, he even framed the Palestinian right of return, the return of stolen Palestinian property and land, not as the return of rightful Palestinian property, but rather as mass Jewish expulsion. So, yeah. I would, of course, be glad to have him on my stream so that we could talk about this and he can be held accountable in a much more suitable environment than like a series of response videos or Instagram DMs or whatever. But I somehow seriously doubt that he is going to allow himself to be so directly scrutinized by someone to his left, pretty much ever. Let us see what Owen Jones actually thinks when he's not simply talking about a really obvious issue like the current Gaza genocide that he helped to cause. So in the article in question, Owen Jones lays out his proposed solution to the Israel-Palestine conflict, the best approach, in his view, of how to resolve it. And it's a doozy, okay? So his first proposal is the recognition that the Holocaust is the single biggest crime in human history by virtue of intent and means. What the fuck does that have to do with it? The second solution is to recognize that Jews in Nazi Germany were victims, and apparently to pretend that there was no Zionist collaboration with Nazi Germany at all, to listen to the lived experience of Jewish people when they talk about anti-Semitism, and to commit to building a Palestinian solidarity movement where British Jews are genuinely committed to the end of the occupation and settlements feel welcome. So the first 4 points of Owen Jones's solution to Palestinian genocide, to the ethnic cleansing of Palestine, to the settler colonialism of the Palestinian people, are all centered on Jewish people, are all centered on the ethnic group which Israel is for, and who can get massive benefits, massive material benefits in Israel at the expense of Palestinians solely for their ethnicity. The first 4 points of his solution to the problem are all just based around, like, the oppressors. Like, they're all based around coddling the feelings of, or, like, treating the ethnic group who is doing ethno-nationalist settler colonialism in Israel as if they're super special and they need to be centered way more than the actual victims of the settler colonization do. This is insane, honestly. Like, in his solution to the Palestinian question, he doesn't actually get to Palestinians until the 5th point. The first 4 points are all about, like, the special feelings of Zionists, basically. Because I know that he says Jews, but what he means is Jewish people who at most are against Netanyahu and who are against, like, the occupation of the West Bank, but who certainly support the existence of the state of Israel as a Jewish ethno-state. And by the way, point number 8 as well is also about Israeli Jews. So in his solution to Palestinian genocide, to the settler colonization of Palestinians, we have 8 points, 5 of which, including the first 4, are entirely centered around, like, the feelings of the people who oppress them, or people who are of the same ethnic group abroad who support that oppression, who support the existence of the state of Israel as a Jewish ethno-state, who at most are against the Netanyahu government and for, like, a two-state solution, not for the right of return, not for actual justice, not for the dismantling of the Zionist ideology, which has resulted in all of this. It is honestly insane. I've never read anything this disgusting, this disconnected from reality, ever. And for him to have painted himself as pro-Palestinian back then, based on this, is so fucking absurd. But for him to whitewash this all away and never address it, for this just to be out there unaddressed without him repudiating it now, without him saying, sorry, I was wrong, is insane. He has always been about coddling the feelings of people who support the Israeli state, who support its settler colonization, who do not want to resolve the core problems of the Palestinian question, which are settler colonial dispossession, including within the borders of Israel, not simply in the West Bank, and the massively genocidal current in Israeli society, which includes the liberal Zionists who Owen Jones loved so much back then, and who I would wager he's still cushy with now. Here's the thing, okay? You should care as much about what Jewish people think about Israel and Palestine solely on the basis of their ethnicity as you would what a German in 1939, 1940, 1941 thought about Nazism, centering people of the ethnicity that an ethno-nationalist settler colonial ideology is for in discussions of said ethno-nationalist settler colonial ideology and its victims is an absurdity. Israel is a state that is for Jews, by Jews, at the expense of Palestinians. If people who are of the same ethnicity that state is for think or don't think that it's great or not, I don't care. If anything, that is something that is going to make you incredibly beyond biased. And the argument should be that your opinion should be ignored, not coddled, not put on a pedestal as Jones does constantly. To center the feelings of Jewish people in regards to Palestinian genocide, settler colonization, suffering, oppression is absolute insanity. But Jones has done that his entire career. Now let us move on to a further example of Owen Jones's Zionism. This is Owen Jones's 2020 book, which was about the Labour Party in the UK ostensibly, but about 3/4 of it is dedicated to whitewashing his role in the anti-Corbyn, anti-Semitism smear campaign. He just straight up recites Zionist propaganda wholesale. And this is the exact sort of thing that led to the situation of today where children are being mass murdered. So here is him doing the typical whitewashing of the foundation of Israel and framing it as some sort of noble socialist endeavour that merited support at the time and was only corrupted later on. Let's read. The approach of much of the left towards Israel in its early days was rather different from what it is now. The Soviet Union and with it the international official communist movement supported Israel's foundation in 1948 and initially provided it with military support. After the calamity of the Holocaust and the extermination of 2/3 of European Jewry, Zionism, long controversial among the Jewish diaspora, became a dominant idea among Jews. There appeared to be an incontestable need for a Jewish homeland, and the state's founders blended their Zionism with socialist rhetoric. The collective communities of the kibbutzim seem like incubators of a new socialist society. Those who were regarded as the torchbearers of the Labour left, like Tony Benn and a bunch of other people who don't merit mentioning, were strong champions of the early Israeli state. Now, you might notice here that not at any point is there any analysis of what the foundation of Israel actually was, who founded it, what the character of this state was, what they did to get there, merely saying, well, the Soviet Union supported it. Well, these people from the British imperialist Labour Party also supported it. That's it. That's the argument that he makes. You know, the Soviet Union supporting the foundation of Israel, saying that as if like the Soviet Union would support things based on an ideological basis rather than foreign policy interests, not even conceiving of that as a potential reason for that. Like, no actual analysis of the supposedly socialist character of this state based on the facts, based on the material reality, purely just an appeal to, well, these people thought it was good, ergo it was good. Now, this is a typical whitewash used by liberal Zionists, where they try to frame Israel as a noble endeavor that just went bad later on. When obviously this is completely erasing the fact that Zionism is a movement of settler colonialism that existed 6, 7, 8 decades before the Holocaust that he links to its founding, which is obviously not the case. Zionism was a colonial movement described by its leaders, by its founders, as a colonial movement from the very beginning. And he mentions like this sort of socialism without mentioning the fact that in order to have this supposed socialism, which was nothing more than a couple of communes and welfare programs, it was all only for one ethnicity. It was only for Jews who moved there, who killed the people who were there, who expelled the people who were there, who took their land and excluded them from this supposedly utopic socialist society. And he leaves all of that out to frame what could best be described as national socialism, as in socialism, though it's not socialism even on that, even if we just analyze the economics of it, but ignoring that, even if we accept this idea that it was somehow like a anarchist commune, a socialist commune or something, it was only for one race, it was for one ethnicity, and everyone else was expelled, excluded from this. Owen Jones leaves that part out to frame it as some sort of noble socialist endeavor that only lost its way later on. Everything about what Zionism was, what it wanted to do, what it did do, is completely erased. And Zionists are framed as well-meaning people who simply lost their way later on. What changed? In the ensuing decades, national liberation struggles against Western colonial oppression, notably the French in Algeria and the US in Vietnam, ignited the imagination of much of the radical left. I mean, no, nothing changed. Nothing materially changed. It was all the same from the very beginning. Israel was a settler colonial endeavor from the very beginning. And he's going to explicitly argue later on here in this passage that it was not a colonial endeavor, which, just wait for that one. He claims here that it was the 1967 Six-Day War which led to the Israeli annexation of Palestinian lands in the West Bank and Gaza. Only then did Israel come to resemble a colonial occupier. So we should ask the question here of this liberal Zionist narrative. What exactly did Israel do in 1948 then? What did the Zionists do even before that? That wasn't colonial occupation? To expel and murder almost 1 million people from their lands and take it for your own exclusive racial use as like invaders to the land, as people who had conspired for more than 50 years beforehand to do explicitly this eventually to the people who were there before you? How is that possible? How do you just leave that out? You need to completely erase the generic settler colonial expulsion and murder of the entire previous population to frame it as he is doing here. Israel was a noble socialist endeavour that only lost its way after 1967. And this is someone who has been given the opportunity to whitewash them, to whitewash their previous beliefs, their still no doubt held beliefs regarding Zionism, regarding Zionist colonialism, merely because he can say the obvious things about Netanyahu and the genocide in Gaza. It is this sort of narrative that enabled this to happen. This sort of whitewashing of Zionism and of Israel that enabled this to happen. To some, the Palestinians came to resemble the Algerians, a subjugated Arab people struggling against a European settler state. What the fuck else was it exactly? How was it not exactly that? With the right-wing Likud party in power, Israel jettisoned its original socialist principles. Does anyone else love socialist mass ethnic deportation, land theft, murder, and colonization? That's what socialism is to Owen Jones. There is somehow not a single mention of any of that in here. In this entire book, in fact, the only time that Jones mentions the 1948 expulsions is when he talks to a Palestinian once or twice just to put it in there so that he can't be accused of not having done so, and he quotes them mentioning it. He doesn't actually mention it in himself, in his own narrative, like this part. So he frames Israel as a noble socialist endeavor, erasing the Nakba, erasing the colonialism, erasing everything about it being a generic European settler colonial style enterprise, which was based around the replacement of the original population with settlers from elsewhere. He erases all of that to frame Israel as a noble socialist endeavor led astray only by Netanyahu's Likud party. So in this next segment here, he basically whitewashes what anti-Zionism is and should be, which is obviously for the entire land. People like him exclusively talk about the West Bank and Gaza in the terms of colonialism and international law and being wrong. But ask him what he thinks about Palestinians returning to their land stolen from them by Israel in 1948 in so-called Israel itself. He'd be against that. Yet while the brutality of Israel's occupation of Palestinian lands is undeniable, the situation was and is fundamentally different from those progress of European settler colonialism. So I will spoil this for you, though I will read it after I spoil it for you. He's arguing that Jews can't do colonialism. That's it. It's a Jewish exceptionalist argument where it does not matter what the actual circumstances on the ground are. What matters is who is doing the colonialism. According to Owen Jones, a Zionist, what matters to brand something settler colonialism is not to look at it and not to say, okay, is this a project where one group is attempting to eliminate and expel the other group to take the land for themselves and literally settle and colonize it and form a new society on the ashes of the other? Because that is what settler colonialism is in a nutshell. And to analyze that, to decide whether something is settler colonial or not, you would simply look at it and ask that question. Is that what it is? Obviously, that is what Israel is. But what Owen Jones does is he appeals to the identity of the settler colonists to try and frame them as special and thus excluded from the label, a labeling of a material reality, of a circumstance that they impose upon others, purely on the basis that they are of a special magical ethnicity that should not be branded with such phrases. So he continues, in those horrors, Europeans arrived to plant flags to claim land on behalf of their own states, while Israel's founders were fleeing the flags of their own nations. That doesn't matter, for one. For two, it's simply not even true. It's simply not true. Israel's founders arrived before the Holocaust began. Israel's founders, many of them, had never even meaningfully experienced anti-Semitism. The idea that Israel was a nation for refugees, which, to be clear, would not exclude it from being settler colonial and innately unjust in the first place, because it's a project of ethno-nationalist settler colonialism to get rid of the people who were there beforehand and completely replace them. Steal their land. It's not okay just because you are a refugee. But the founders of Israel weren't refugees. The founders of Israel were ethno-nationalists. Ethno-nationalists, settler colonialists colonialist ideologues who wanted to get rid of what was there and create their own society only for themselves on a racial, ethnic basis. So this is simply wrong. Rhodesia was not founded by survivors of a genocide who had already suffered 2 millennia of persecution. Israel was both a state founded by victims of unimaginable horrors seeking a refuge, and a state in which many saw the characteristics of old-style settler colonialism. It doesn't matter what it was founded by, but it was factually not founded by victims. Israel was factually founded as an ethno-nationalist project of European-style settler colonialism that had been planned for more than 60 to 70 years at the time of its founding. So this is just a lie. The founders of the Zionist movement literally described it as colonialism. Positively so. They thought colonialism was cool and awesome and they wanted to get on it for themselves. And then he says here, anyone who doesn't desire security for the Jewish people of Israel is as dangerous as they are wrong-headed. If you do not desire security for people who have built their society on the ruins of one they destroyed, who have built their lives on the destruction of the lives of millions of others, on the continued imprisonment of millions of others, on the periodic terror bombing and massacre of millions of others. You are dangerous and wrong-headed. Owen Jones is a Zionist. How can you possibly write this in 2020 and not be a Zionist? You have to give me a fucking break. He still believes all of this, by the way. He has never denounced it. Just because he's like, Netanyahu is bad and Israel is doing genocide does not mean that he still does not believe this. Like Owen Jones is and always has been far more concerned with Zionist feelings than he ever has been about Palestinian suffering. He has always been all about coddling Zionists and scolding anti-Zionists, way more than he ever has been pro-Palestinian. And no one could ever write a line like that, which is, the people who do settler colonialism are like poor little babies who are at risk of persecution from people who are against them and what they do. It is absurdly insane. Like framing Jewish Israelis as victims in any way, shape, or form, as like people who need security, who are not themselves, literally depriving every single day the most basic necessities of life from others for their own benefit, from the Palestinian people, is insane. Many Jews who are politically hostile both to the occupation of the Palestinian territories and to Israel's depressing right-wing trajectory nonetheless retain a profoundly emotional connection with Israel, a state which is seen as a refuge, however imperfect, if once again the winds shift and the anti-Semites come back for more. So let's dissect this statement. It's nothing more than an appeal to a special ethnicity, than an appeal to like an imagined innate oppression that Palestinians need to suffer for. You will note here that what you described here is a Zionist, politically hostile to the occupation of Palestinian territories. When he says that, he means the West Bank and Gaza. The Jews who he is describing here are people who, if they are Israelis living in Israel, they literally live on Palestinian land, in Palestinian houses. Their cushy lives were created and have been maintained thanks to the destruction of the Palestinian people. And what Owen Jones is concerned with is their feelings. They have a profoundly emotional connection with a racist ethno-state run for one specific ethnicity, Jews, at the expense of another, Palestinians. If you have an emotional connection with that, you are an enemy to be fought against. Your feelings should never be taken into account. You and your feelings should be ignored. You are to be crushed underfoot. You are not an ally, a friend whose feelings need to be considered ever at all. What a fucking joke. Skin curling. Honestly. Palestinians need to suffer so that a white guy from Brooklyn can have a refuge if his imagined, like, American Jewish genocide happens. What an insane statement to make. Sorry, I need to be able to go and live in someone else's house in Israel while millions of people are imprisoned for my benefit 20 kilometers away, just in case this scenario that I made up that is never going to happen happens. What an insane argument. For many Palestinians, the concept of Zionism cannot be separated from their lived experience of occupation and the deprivation of their own right to national self-determination. Different sensitivities apply to discussion in the West. For some elements on the Western left, Zionist became the ultimate cuss word. Zionism was a political ideology, they argued, and one inherently rooted in oppression. How is it not? How is forming a country for one ethnicity at the expense of another not rooted in oppression? Let's find out. Oh, he doesn't actually tell us. But the imprecise usage of Zionism and Zionists in the West is deeply problematic, leaving it eviscerated of meaning. After all, those self-describing and Zionists include everyone from Israeli hard-right extremists who desire the annexation of all Palestinian lands to Israeli peaceniks who support the end of Palestinian occupation. His great rebuttal is to say that the word Zionist encompasses Zionists and also different types of Zionists. Therefore, we can't use that term. Like this whitewashing of Zionism by like the word peacenik. What a disgusting word, by the way. It's like use the Hebrew term instead. What does it mean to be a peacenik? It means denial of the Palestinian right to their own homeland, to their own land, to their own homes. An Israeli peacenik is like a Nazi German who thought that Poland and Ukraine should have been enough for the settler movement, and that going further than that was wrong. That's what an Israeli peacenik is. It's, we have taken enough. What we have is enough. Let's not take the rest. And let's continue to keep them out of our ethno-state on an ethnic basis. Let's keep what we stole from them. That is what a peacenik is. So yeah, those are two different types of Zionists, and I do not care to differentiate between them because both are reprehensible, disgusting Nazis. A soft Nazi is still a Nazi, even if he doesn't want to annex the rest of Eastern Europe like the full-on Nazis like Hitler does. A 2015 survey found that while 59% of British Jews self-identified as Zionists, 90% supported Israel's right to exist as a Jewish state. I don't care what Zionism means to Zionists or not. Since when have we ever required approval from the group that an ethno-state is for to be against that ethno-state? Why is this even being mentioned here? Aside from just to appeal to like a special ethnicity that we need to take into account. Jews are doing the ethno-nationalist settler colonialism, ergo it's special and we need to think about their feelings. I will not think about their feelings, and I will not think about the feelings of any settler colonist ethno-nationalist anywhere. The second that you do that, you are on their side, you are whitewashing what they're doing. Jones legitimately mentions the feelings of like Zionist Jews, whether they feel good or bad or not about being called what they are, which is settler colonists, murderers. He spends more time complaining about that than he does about Palestinians being massacred. He says here, some make direct comparisons between the Israeli state and the Nazis, comparing the predicament of the Palestinians to that of the Jews during the Holocaust. The realities of the Israeli occupation are grim enough on their own terms, without a comparison which is as offensive as it is manifestly untrue. Offensive to who, Owen? Zionists? Mass murdering genociders? Settler colonists, ethno-nationalists. There has been no attempt to physically exterminate the Palestinian people. Holy shit. What is expulsion and massacre if not physical extermination? The idea is to get rid of them from the area. When they are physically removed, that's extermination for all intents and purposes. Do you know what the Nazis planned to do before they eventually decided on the Holocaust? The deportation of all Jews to Madagascar and reservations in Poland. They actually formed some of these reservations during the war. The Lublin concentration camp was originally the Lublin Reservation. The Zionists did to Palestinians by mass deporting them, particularly to Gaza, what the Nazis had originally planned for Jews. Why can we not compare that? Let's compare Nazism and Zionism, Owen. Ethno-nationalist, yes. Specifically National Socialist in that conception, yes. Settler colonial, yes. Wanting to eliminate or expel all people who were not considered of their own ethnic group, yes. Why is it that we cannot compare these two very similar ideologies, Owen? The only reason why you would ever say that is because you were a Zionist who wants to deny the power of that comparison, who wants to deny us, actual anti-Zionists, actual pro-Palestinian people, of using a comparison that every single person in Western societies will immediately understand. He continues, the comparison is meant only to bait Jews with the memory of their most murderous prosecutors? As I just clearly explained, that is not the point of it. But you acting like it is Zionism in its purest form. You attempting to deny people the use of that comparison is Zionism. It's pro-Israel propaganda. The comparison is only meant to bait Jews over the memory of their most murderous persecutors. Once again, the feelings of the Zionists, the Israelis who carry out the genocide, the expulsions, the massacres, the colonialism, who run their ethno-state and want it to continue, are above making actual accurate comparisons based on material reality, based on factual analysis. If Zionist Jews are offended by that comparison, that's what really matters. Owen Jones is here to defend the feelings of the genocidal ethno-nationalist settler maniacs. You will notice that throughout this entire passage that we have gone over here, at no point does Owen Jones ever actually make a real analysis of the facts. The only arguments that he made are basically they are Jewish, they are special, they are magical, they are oppressed, ergo, you cannot call them these things. You know, even if you have analyzed the facts and you are saying these things based on those facts, like saying that Israel is settler colonial, saying that Israel is is similar to Nazism. That is wrong because they are Jewish. That is wrong because they have a special ethnicity. That and his other argument is basically Israel was socialist while erasing the Nakba, while erasing the literal fucking mass ethnic expulsion of everyone who was there, almost everyone who was there beforehand, the destruction of their society and its replacement with a European-derived new one, exactly the characteristics of settler colonialism. He nonetheless does nothing but appeal to like a couple of Labour politicians and the Soviet Union having supported the foundation of Israel, and that is his evidence for it being socialist and good, and his justification for erasing the Nakba and everything else. So Owen Jones is someone who, in the service of whitewashing Israel, has even whitewashed Zionist Nazi collaborators in the past. And this is especially funny because he is so against any accurate comparison of Zionism to the Nazis that he will literally whitewash Zionists who collaborated with the Nazis. So this is from 2021, roughly 3 years ago, when there was an article in the Electronic Intifada talking about Rezo Kastner. So Rezo Kastner was a Hungarian Jew who, upon learning that Jews were to be massacred, they were to be killed because most of them didn't actually know that, he made a deal with the Nazis to secure safe passage for a select group of Zionists while not telling the other Jews who were there what was going to be done to them. And if he had told them, they might have been able to attempt to escape themselves, to organize an uprising or something like that. But because for Zionists, all that they cared about was their ethno-nationalist project, all that Kastner cared about was smuggling the Zionists out. Because his goal was not to save Jews. His goal was to smuggle people out who could be useful to the Israeli ethno-nationalist project. And in response to that article, which is such a damning story, by the way, that Kastner, who was a member of the Israeli government, disgracefully, he sued a journalist who revealed this about him in Israeli court, and the judge ruled that everything the journalist had said was true. So he was found in an Israeli court to have been a Nazi collaborator, factually. How did Owen Jones react to this article based entirely on facts that even an Israeli court had confirmed the facts of? Jones titles his article, "No, Jews did not collaborate in their own genocide," attempting to frame someone who wrote about specifically Zionist collaboration with the Nazis as them saying that like all Jews voluntarily marched to the gas chambers, which is an insane reframing and something that no one would do unless they are like a professional false anti-Semitism allegation smear agent. The article, as is said here, was specifically about the Zionist leadership in Hungary in 1944. Obviously not all Jews, but that's how Owen Jones dishonestly frames it, because his primary concern, again, is to protect the feelings of Zionists. His primary concern has always been policing anti-Israel, anti-Zionist speech, even to the point of historical denialism, as we just went over his erasure of the Nakba from the narrative of Israel's founding, his erasure of colonialism, of the fact that Israel is an ethno-nationalist society founded on the ruins of another which they destroyed. And here, him erasing the fact that the Zionist movement in Hungary factually collaborated with the Nazis at the expense of all the other Jews who were there, who were not Zionists, or who were not a part of the Zionist movement at least. The Israeli judge who ruled against him in the libel case said the Nazis' patronage of Kastner and their agreement to let him save 600 prominent Jews were part of the plan to exterminate the Jews. The thing is, he's like, both non-Zionist and Zionist Jews told me that this idea that Zionists collaborated with the Nazis was problematic. The entire article is literally just about the feelings of, and when he says anti-Zionist Jews, I do not believe him one bit, because Owen Jones himself is obviously not an anti-Zionist. His idea of what an anti-Zionist is like a two-statist who thinks that like the occupation of the West Bank goes too far, but the rest of the Israeli occupation of Palestine is totally fine. So when he says like anti-Zionist Jewish socialist, what he's talking about is just a Zionist, I guarantee you. Because no actual anti-Zionist would have a problem with someone simply noting the facts regarding Zionist collaboration with the Nazis. Jones is literally just obsessed, totally obsessed with coddling the feelings of ethno-nationalist settler colonists. Whitewashing of Zionism as well, claiming that Zionism was once a multi-ethnic, multi-racial movement. There is also another part of this where Owen Jones narrates one of the specific instances of the false anti-Semitism allegations smear campaign against Labour under Corbyn. He says here, "In the first phase of Corbyn's leadership, attention focused on incidents which had occurred under his predecessor. In April 2016, it emerged that Naz Shah, the new Labour MP for Bradford West, had, during the Israeli military's August 2014 Operation Protective Edge, that resulted in the deaths of hundreds of Gazan Palestinians, shared a map superimposing Israel on the US, accompanied by the headline Solution for Israel-Palestine Conflict. Relocate Israel into the United States, adding that might save them some pocket money, the US some pocket money. This was dealt with swiftly. Shah resigned as Josh McDonald's parliamentary private secretary, met Jewish community groups, and came to be seen as a model in rehabilitation. Jones presents this as if that is just sort of self-evidently actually anti-Semitic. You notice there's no questioning of that. Jones does not dare say the truth about this, which is that's not fucking anti-Semitic at all. What the fuck are you talking about? Saying, as Israel was literally massacring Gazans in droves for their race, that perhaps if the USA, which is the primary enabler and funder of Israeli genocide, and has been for decades upon decades, saying that if the USA loves Israel so much, how about Israel just goes there and Palestinians can have their land back? How in the fuck is that anti-Semitic? How in the fuck does that warrant meeting Jewish community groups and going through rehabilitation? Basically going through like HR bullshit to become palatable enough for Zionists. Regardless of how much Jones would deny they are Zionists, obviously that's Zionist bullshit. Like, there's no questioning of this from him at all. He just accepts that it is anti-Semitic. Full stop. If you are against the existence of a Jewish ethno-state at the expense of the Palestinian people, according to Owen Jones, and specifically in Palestine too, because that's what that is saying, basically. If you support Israel so much, why don't you just give Israel a part of your country instead of having it be there in Palestine and exist at the expense of Palestinians? That is a perfectly reasonable anti-Israel statement to make. But Owen Jones just presents that uncritically as if it's self-evidently anti-Semitic. There is no questioning of that at all. So this is just a limited selection from that one book and one article. There is way more on this. This is what Owen Jones has always been, a liberal Zionist who supports the existence of Israel as a Jewish ethno-state, who simply thinks that Israel goes too far in its occupation of the West Bank and its periodic attacks and now genocide in Gaza, who has whitewashed Israel as a noble endeavour from the very beginning, that rather than being obviously innately genocidal and innately settler colonial in its very conception, merely was led astray by extremists later down the line. People like this have enabled what is happening today. Owen Jones, him writing stuff like this, is what has enabled what is happening today. Him not only denying the real nature of Israel, not only denying history, but actively scolding those who do not deny it. That is what has enabled this. He has not only denied it, but he has tried to shut down discussion of it with false anti-Semitism allegations. He and others like him, don't just think this is only him, but he and others like him have long been far more concerned with the feelings of people who are either Zionist Jews who are themselves genocidal victimizers of Palestinians and whose feelings should not be taken into consideration ever at all, or other Zionist Jews who, in spite of Owen's ridiculous characterization of Zionism, are still Zionists. Because obviously you're a Zionist if all that you're against is the occupation of the West Bank. You can still be a Zionist and be against Netanyahu. Owen Jones proves that himself. This is someone who has elevated the feelings of those who either live in a state that exists for their ethnic benefit at the expense of an entire other group of people, or who support that state based on nothing more than them sharing ethnicity with those people. He has been putting their feelings over the actual physical destruction, oppression, dispossession, and colonization of Palestinians for as long as he's been at this. And just because he's suddenly on the right side now, and in these situations where it's incredibly easy to be on the right side, doesn't mean that he's an ally even one bit. Denouncing the Gaza genocide is simple shit. Denouncing Netanyahu is simple shit. What actually takes courage is denouncing and accurately describing why these things can happen. Why someone like Netanyahu was inevitable. Why this sort of whitewashing about the true nature of Israel got us to where we are today. Owen Jones's role, and the role of many others like him, has always been to provide a left-leaning sort of veneer on the settler colonial state of Israel, to justify its existence and to frame what is actually a victimizer population as victims. To even be talking about anti-Semitism in the context of Israel-Palestine, outside of the very obvious instances of it, like actual neo-Nazis who just pretend to care about Palestine because they're anti-Semites. Outside of like that is a pure red herring designed to distract attention from what is factually happening there, which is Israel is a Jewish ethno-state solely for the benefit of the Jews who live there, that exists in order to oppress another ethnic group for the benefit of those Jews. That is the reality. And to talk about anti-Semitism at all in that context, to pay any water to some Jewish person's feelings being hurt or whatever, if you denounce Israel a bit too harshly, is ridiculous. It's like worrying about anti-white racism in the context of fucking South Africa under apartheid. It's like worrying about anti-white sentiments in the context of the American fucking Confederacy. It's ludicrous. What you have in Israel is a relation of oppressor and oppressed, not like some tragic scenario where an oppressed group of people, are forced into oppressing another group of people against their will. Give us a fucking break. Now, Jones can't respond to this stuff. He knows he can't respond to it. The only valid response to everything that I'm saying here would be, you're right, 100% right, I have changed my views completely and I agree with you on everything. That would be a valid response. Because as of yet, he has given absolutely no indication that has happened. But what he is going to do instead is scream anti-Semitism at me, if he does respond, which I'm not convinced he has the balls for that. I'm not convinced that he has the balls to actually throw down honestly with someone who is not a fucking coward like him, whitewashing Zionism for a decade. Because ultimately, that is what you have to do if you want to be a part of the mainstream British media, which he still very much is, regardless of how he tries to frame himself as independent now. He's still writing periodic columns for The Guardian and stuff like that. If he described Israel as what it really was, if he described the history of Zionism accurately, if he stopped coddling the feelings of Zionist Jews as if we should give a fucking shit about what people who support a genocidal settler colonial ethno-state think and feel. The reason why he does that, at least in part, is probably not because he really believes it 100%. It's because he values his privileged position in the British mainstream media more than he does talking about things in the terms that actually need to be talked about. And he gets a lot of clout from policing those who actually do that. Back in 2017, he even gave a keynote speech at a Zionist organization's event. And after that, he gave an interview on it. Why I'm defending Jews on the left for the Jewish Chronicle, which, if it's not clear, this is a genocidal pro-Israel newspaper. On its front page, you go to the front page and you have nothing but pro-Israel propaganda everywhere. And in 2017, Jones gave them a nice little interview where he talked about, why he's defending Jews, why he gave a keynote speech at a Zionist propaganda organization with links to the Israeli state. And he does not support academic or cultural boycotts because there is a danger you end up indiscriminately targeting Jewish people. I've never been involved in BDS, he says. He only supports boycotts of products from illegal settlements. My Jewish friends often feel uncomfortable. Oh yeah, what's important isn't Zionist massacre of Palestinians, isn't Zionist settler colonization. It's the feelings. It's the feelings of rich white first world Jews. Oh God. Look, this is someone who for a decade has been Zionist. Full stop. Liberal Zionist. People like him are why this has been allowed to happen. The only adequate response to this from him would be, you're right. I repudiate what I used to say, what I used to do. I agree with you now. Not to give interviews to literal fucking Zionist propaganda outlets, assuring them that you're against the most basic boycott and sanction movement, and that you're only against products from illegal settlements. But yeah, I think his ego isn't going to allow that to happen, and I think his desire to stay in the good graces of the mainstream British media especially will not allow that to happen. Because ultimately that matters more to him than the burned bodies of Palestinian babies.